Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about how do you dance with nature, with the ethers, with the sun, the moon, the stars. How do you connect? Are you all running out and hugging a tree? Perhaps you're laying below the sun and hoping just to take in its radiant force of energy. Others are saying, I have a plant-based diet. I get all the plants I need. I'm good to go with nature. What we'll be talking about today is a deeper connection to the forces of nature around us. What is it all about? We are nature. Nature is already inside of us. It's just awakening to the energy source we are. Connect with the energy source of nature, and then we got it good to go. Sometimes we get stuck in the middle and we say, that's a tree over there and it doesn't have a brain or a consciousness. We say, oh, I'm better this and better than that because I'm human. When in essence, we are all of one source, and the source is energy. How can we navigate our world, see what's coming up for us, kind of get some ease connecting with the world, but also helping it survive, helping it flourish, just as we are. All of these things we'll be talking about today with Mary Reynolds Thompson. Her book is The Way of the Wild Soul Woman, 5 Earth Archetypes to Unleash Your Full Feminine Power. And what Mary has really outlined is a way to work through the archetypes, but however, many times people will say, oh, but this is what you are, and what now? And you're kind of like looking. She has given us a template, a guide, and a path to be able to work through the entire process and see how we feel, see what's coming up for us, and how we can really tap into our power. Mary, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's wonderful to be with you, Dr. Jeanette.
I'm so glad to have you to talk about this because I think sometimes people say, oh, I'm good to go. Yeah, I smell the roses on my way out and I'm connected to nature. Don't you think we are kind of on the precipice of really engaging in awareness with the universe?
Yes, I think we are. And I think this separation from nature, which has been such a fundamental sort of wounding in our modern culture, this idea that you talked about in your introduction is that somehow we're different than nature, separate to her, and not actually a example of her. We're really, if you deeply think about it, the earth in human form. We're made of the same stuff. We emerged out of the same great belly of this planet. And so smelling roses is really good, but it goes deeper than that.
Yes. You know, you wrote in your book, a call to remember that you carry within you the mystery of forests and the granite of mountains. I can distinctly remember so many times over my life because I've always been open and aware as a medium, and I've always been called to things. I can remember driving down this highway, a tremendous snowstorm, and looking up to my right. And on this really dense forest, there was one single tree, and it didn't have anything else around it. And I said, you can stand solid. You got this. You know, It was like giving me a message, you know. And I think sometimes we look at it and we say, oh, but that's just something, you know, and we want to justify it or reason it out as our human words. Do you think perhaps maybe what your book is all about is about bringing you back to say, let's let go of some of those words and feel?
Well, definitely, because working with archetypes is, as you also mentioned, working with energy. So we feel, if I say to you, desert or desert woman, immediately within you is a sense perhaps of spaciousness, of heat, of even silence, solitude. Now, those are feeling things. Those aren't literal things that live in your head. They are embodied reactions. So working with archetypes is really to awaken to the energy of some of these ancient landscapes out of which, again, we arose. They are as much our ancestors as they are archetypes. I also love the point you make, which is often we have these incredible moments of communion in nature, a sense that we are receiving messages, right, about ourselves and our lives. And then our kind of rational mind comes in and says, oh, stop being so silly, right? And that's what the world would have us say if we went around talking about these things. We're kind of afraid that people will call us crazy. So we keep it hidden, little realizing that many people, and certainly our indigenous ancestors, experience the world like this.
Yes. You know, I think also, too, is that if you look, I'm almost 70 and you're older also, I think it's a very much experience of the elders these days, I would say over the age of 50, where they have had all of these experiences throughout their life. They just have not shared all of them with others. And now we see books like yours and many others who are starting to write about it because they kind of feel like, yeah, now's the time to speak up, to cross the bridge, so to speak, to get this out there. And we see an expansion of all kinds of groups and events where people are opening up to this, yes?
Absolutely. There is this emergence of Gaia consciousness. And it's also been led by young people who realize that their future depends upon a shift of consciousness, which has us realize that we will not survive if we do not protect the earth. So we elders now, we have nothing to lose, right? We are just speaking out from our hearts because the time has come. But the other thing is, it is simply in the zeitgeist now because we're on the brink, right? We are on the brink of destroying this precious planet out of which all life depends. And so, yes, old rituals are returning, conferences, festivals, goddess festivals, Gaia festivals, environmental conferences, ecological encounters. All of these things are definitely beginning to rise into our consciousness. When I first started doing the work that I do about, 2 decades ago now, when I would talk about it, people would look at me like, she is woo-woo, right? Totally woo-woo. Well, times have caught up. And, you know, occasionally it happens, but not the way it did. There is a sense of urgency in our connecting to the earth now.
You know, I've heard this very similar thing, you know, over, I could say probably my entire life, but definitely a reflection back on the last 5 decades where people have had that same reaction to me. What are you talking about? You're crazy. You don't know what you're saying. You know, we've always had that, you know. And, you know, I could walk in a forest and I could hear the voices behind me. I can walk down the street in New Orleans and I know exactly where I was in a past life. I could have a sense of during a hurricane of what the wind is doing and how to turn with it. So I think a lot of people have had these little glimmers of how we connect to an energy source other than ourselves as an extension of ourselves. But yet we don't have the connection yet because we don't have the words or the dialogue. And your book puts some dialogue into the energy forms and says, try these words and see how it works for you. Because many need that. They need exactly that, the words, a different vocabulary to be able to build upon, perhaps?
Yes, I think very much so. And it was really interesting to me in the writing of this book, a sense of channeling to some extent these archetypes and deeply listening to what the deserts or the forests or the oceans and rivers or mountains or grasslands were saying, and using imagination. There's no two ways that our modern culture sort of demeans imagination, calling it fantasy, but it isn't. Serious imagination is a deep leap of empathy and really listening to the wisdom of these amazing beings and realizing that their messages were totally counter to the messages that we're getting in our modern society. So in the forest, it's like stand still, be rooted, honor your dreams, honor those things you were talking about, those whispers of the soul, those deep intuitions, a kind of feral intelligence. Well, do any of us grow up being told to follow feral intelligence? No. But these different landscapes had these different messages that essentially, for me, spoke to a strength and a creativity that resides naturally in all of us that has been tamped down, tamed, and shamed.
Yes. Can you talk to us about the very first archetype? It's a desert woman. There's 5. And the desert woman, you know, I immediately when I read it, I said, Arizona, when I lived in Arizona. And I can remember that deep connection. And being a naturopath, you know, you're connected to the herbs and the land and using them as medicine. And we had been up on a lot of the Indian places, and we were helping them also. There was a deep connection there that you could really sense and feel. And, you know, it's interesting because I have this one exact plant that I always feel connected to, and it's called Ocotillo. And Ocotillo it works for the pelvic area, and it really works to be able to open up your first chakra. And I'm thinking, oh, how interesting to be this first archetype that we're talking about, releasing the old, because a lot of times we're so rooted in that first chakra, we really need to open something up to get something moving. And here was this herb speaking to me. And every time I picked it up or looked at a picture of it, it looked like, it would remind me of like a dust devil going across the desert. In other words, cleaning things up. So that was how my connection, you know, was to your story.
Oh. I just absolutely love that. And you have given me, that's so inspiring to me. I love that because you're absolutely right. It is about opening up that root chakra, because without an opening, there's no room for anything to happen. And the sense of the desert woman saying, you've got to let go of something before you can make room for anything else. And oftentimes, especially for women, it's about that expectation of others on us, that we are supposed to be a certain way. We are supposed to take care of everyone. We are supposed to be responsible for everything, that we will not be loved if we're not constantly doing. And Desert Woman says, you know, it's killing you. Stop it. You know, put it down here so that you can make room to be with yourself and come to know yourself in the bone. So it is this real sense of sweeping. I love that. Sweeping clean. Something, not everything. We do it over a lifetime, right? But this idea of making space for something else to enter.
Yeah. You know, I can distinctly remember when I was getting ready in Arizona, and I had a sense that I needed to leave. I needed to move. And I couldn't get centered in at where to go. And it was like, where to go, where do you go? And I took a map, because I hadn't paper maps at that time, and I took a pendulum, and I went across. And it just kept zeroing in on New Orleans to come back here. And and I'm like, okay, I don't have money. I don't know anyone else there. I don't know how I'm going to work there. I mean, everything was against it in rational being. But I packed up my daughter and I, and we went in the truck and we moved. And everything did fall apart when I got here. I mean, literally fell apart. Like, Like it was pretty bad, but everything fell apart. But I had to think that, okay, it's going to fall apart because I'm not supposed to be on the story that was, always to be. You're going to be this, that have been created. And what came out of it, I think sometimes is what you find when you talk about your archetypes is that things need to fall away. And when things fall away, they weren't meant to fall away because you made a wrong choice or you went down the wrong road or perhaps you weren't listening or, that old saying, oh, you didn't learn your lesson yet. It's like, oh, when people start to say that, I just cringe. The answer is when things fall apart, it's like, awesome. What's next? What's next?
Right.
That's living face forward, correct?
I think it is, and I think it's really beautiful because if we think of the desert and the desert snake that always sheds its skin, and it has to in order to grow, and if it doesn't shed its skin, it'll just strangle. And this is really true psychologically and emotionally for us, that things sometimes have to break apart, literally, in order for us to grow, and that out of that comes the new life, right? And we are so adverse in this culture. It's like everything, so much, I think, of what keeps us kind of from living on purpose is that everybody wants us to be safe, right?
Right.
Everybody wants us to be secure. Everybody wants us to be sort of fixed in place in some really comfortable situation. But that's not nature. That's not life. Everything evolves. Everything changes. And things break open. I mean, certain trees need fires in order to put their seeds in the world. Sometimes something has to burn through our lives in order for something new to be born. So this need for security, which I think has really become so much part of this modern culture that we live in, we have to be comfortable. We can't make anyone uncomfortable. Really works against us. And so, yes, you had this intuitive, powerful feeling of this is where I need to go. Didn't necessarily make logical sense, didn't make even financial sense by the sounds of things, but you knew that this was part of your journey and you were courageous enough to go for it. And I think that that's wonderful. And more of us need to do that,
Yeah. I think sometimes the strength we find, we believe comes from the support of others, when in essence the strength that we are seeking is a strength from within. And I think that's very profound to be able to listen to that a few different times and to say, which way am I really living in present? Don't you think, Mary, that on the forest woman, when you talk about it, I always think, you say rising from the ashes, and it's interesting when I think about that because I think about Pennsylvania. I think about the woods where we used to live. And I think about all of the trees. They just drop all of their leaves and they're just resting. And then these cycles just keep repeating and repeating. And, in the spring, things start to sprout up. And sometimes I think if we allow ourselves to become the cycle of the seasons, wherever we live, instead of saying I've got to have a cycle of a season, like in other words, do I have to have a real Christmas tree if I live in Florida? Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like find your cycle of the seasons where you are and embrace that. Isn't that what we're asking?
Well, it is, and it's actually interesting because at the end of my book, I do actually connect the archetypes to the seasons. And in a way, the desert woman is more the shedding of those leaves. She's the autumn. And forest woman is the winter. And for me, she feels that way because she's about the darkness and about the mystery of that and about living into the questions rather than quickly seeking sort of superficial, instant answers. She's about just stating something that comes deep within us. And she's very much about stand still. Just be here now in the process of listening, so deeply to what is wanting to be born within you, rather than rushing all over the place and exploring, the sense that you will take trails that lead nowhere or come loop back again, but that there is a place in life for not seeking to get it right, but to simply experiment. I tell the story of Claire Dubois, who founded a wonderful organization called Tree Sisters, in this part of the book, where she was literally on her way to give a very sensible PowerPoint presentation on the environment to a group. And her car slid off the road and rammed into a tree. And stunned, she staggered out. And the tree literally spoke to her and said, you're on the wrong path. This is the path. You have to start this organization, which is Tree Sisters, and it's going to involve reforesting the tropics, because that's what we need to do. And you cannot fail. This was the bit of the message that she downloaded from this tree that really struck me. You cannot fail, because life is an experiment.
I think also, too, the idea is that everything we find, we see, we sense is not set in stone. We like to believe there's a template that we're playing out. That whole idea, write up your obituary and make sure you follow it through, kind of idea. It's truly not at all. Once you've leaped into the idea that you're so much more than just an 8-to-5 job, having kids, and then retiring, your world really opens up, and that's really what this book is about. And I think also, too, let's talk about the ocean, the river woman. I live on the Mississippi River. That's it. It's, you could feel the power of it. You could feel its drought. Last year, it decided to go backwards because we didn't have enough water.
I know.
You could feel the pain. You could feel the pain and the pressure. And, my body seems to feel all of these things. I had many medical crises last year that ran right in line with it because I could feel it so innately. Don't you think that sometimes people will get to the point where they will start to feel these so much that they will actually sway with the changes and cycles of the earth?
Absolutely. It's interesting to me that we've built so many dams on this planet that we've thrown the earth off its axis. Think about that. It's just unbelievable. But yes, and I think women particularly, men too, but women particularly are so attuned to water, right? Our bellies fill with ancient seas of amniotic fluid when we get pregnant. Milk spurts from our breasts. We bleed. And there's a way that we feel the moon cycles, the water cycles, so intimately within our own bodies. Oftentimes, our menstruation cycles will mirror the waxing and waning of the moon. So there is this deep sense, which you really spoke to, of feeling this deep affinity and intimacy with water. And for me, it very much represents longing and desire. We know that our, mouths flood with saliva when we're longing to eat. And when we feel sexually desire, we become very moist and watery. So there is this sense of understanding that longing and desire is connected with our relationship with water. And so when a river goes backwards because of drought, it's just a tearing at our psyches that something is so wrong with the world. And what does that mean for us? It's like it's not just happening to the river, as you say. It happens to us because we are so connected. We carry within our body miles and miles of rivers and arteries, So we feel it.
Well, also, too, I think the idea, I've always said that the city is a lily pad. And I've always sensed that. I've always known that. I've been here for over 5 decades. I'll say, oh, today feels like a lily pad. I feel like the ground is shaking. I'll turn on social media and there'll be some water pipes broken somewhere, or everybody's electricity will be out, or maybe it'll be raining and it'll be flooding. So I think the idea is that when we perceive that there is a shift somewhere, we can also see it reflecting in the outer world. And I think that's important to understand because also, too, when I think about it like hurricanes here, I think, oh, okay, I understand that because the earth right now is washing itself and it's shape-shifting, too. Who are we to say that just a hurricane coming and taking out a city or an area is a bad thing? The earth said that this is my land. I need to move it. I need to clean it up. I need to shape-shift it. They're not saying... they're not saying, oh, well, I don't have a house, then what am I going to do about this, that, or the other? The earth in its energy form is not having a human conversation. And I think that's important to understand for all these archetypes, yes?
Yeah, I think this recognition that, the earth is primary and we are secondary in a way is really important, and that the earth will have its way one way or another. I think is, we need to be humbled in a way. So I think there's a wonderful paradox that goes on with working with these earth archetypes, which is that they both empower us to access aspects of our psyche and soul that may have lain dormant within us.
Right.
But also that they humble us. They put us right size. They put us within a context and a web of life in which we are actually not in charge.
Also, too, Mary, let's talk briefly. We have 2 more. One's the mountain. What I think of as, people say about the pinnacle, they've reached it, they could stand up, they feel powerful. And you see a lot of people climbing mountains these days. What is your take on the mountain woman?
Mountain woman, for me, is... she really has 2 main messages. One is that we have to hold power differently. So again, in our modern culture, we have this sense of that we climbed the mountain independently.
Right.
And I see those images now of Everest Base Camp as a complete trash zone. And there's just this kind of like, stick a flag on the top, I got there, me, I did it. Well, it's a complete nonsense. It takes a whole village to get anyone to the top of the mountain. And so there's this invitation for me in Mountain Women to reframe what power is and see it as not power over, but power with. That we are all helping each other and that we need to uplift each other and that we are not going to get anywhere unless we chain together and we rise as one. Because if we're leaving people below, this is not going to work. The other message, and I think it goes back to this, it's okay to be uncomfortable, is that many of us have been taught to be terrified of conflict, opposition, our own hot-bellied rage, all of these things. And Mountain Woman is an invitation into that. She says, we would be living on a dead planet if we didn't have a molten core that was constantly erupting, causing collisions, all of these things. It's part of our inheritance. And we shouldn't be afraid to express ourselves with clean energy. I mean, she's really, about clean energy because, of course, we've mined mountains in horrible, horrible ways. But she's about if your rage is in service of the whole, the community, if you are standing in opposition and saying no more, setting that boundary for the good, then go for it, own it, allow it. And I think particularly women, we have just been absolutely silenced. And as I wrote that chapter, so much about it became about this ability to speak our truth and to be unafraid. to just put it out there.
Yeah. And also, too, Mary, the last archetype is a grassland woman. And I wrote right next to it the word presence, because you talk about it, about common ground stuff. And I think of the word presence, because when you have presence, you aren't looking through the human filter. You aren't saying, you're mine, this is it, you're my kids, I'm this person, I do this job, whatever that might be. And when you look out on a grassland, there's not all of this stuff sticking up. There just is. In other words, I think of just, a lot of weeds, or, well, people call them weeds, but I just call them, a plant of a different shade. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot of grasses there. It's just there. It's not anything calling attention. It's not anything trying to force you to have to feel or be. And that's just what I call as a solitude of presence, perhaps.
That's beautifully expressed. I would also say that you're absolutely right about looking out across a sort of sea of grasses, but it's underneath the soil that the real work of the grasslands happens, in this incredibly rich, interwoven tapestry of roots, which affords the grasses to stand without protection against all the winds and the rains and not to erode, right? So it takes these threads of connection to have the grasslands thrive. And that's the message of Grassland Woman, that after we've taken this immense journey through these different archetypes, we need to return to community with our sacred medicine and find our place here to be present in community, giving of our gifts. And for that, we have to cultivate connection. And it's not easy in our world, right? It can be a pretty lonely place. And a lot of people we come back from this great adventure and they kind of go, oh, we sort of preferred you to where you were before, right?
Right.
They don't want to receive that medicine. So there's this patience, which I think is also something you're sort of alluding to, of staying and being willing to do the work, to finally build and find and create that community that can see you truly for who you are, so that you can step into your full purpose in this world.
Yeah. And Mary, do you think that sometimes people will say, I am this archetype, and they stay centered into that. They create their home with some of the tokens and the tools. They dress like it to be able to show themselves that they are grounded and rooted. They tend to live their life in that archetype, and they stay there. I think sometimes we say that may work for some. It doesn't work for everyone. Just as myself, I have gone through all of these and felt them all deeply, as you have. And I think the idea is that we can be in and within all of them. Yes?
I think you actually, I would say more than you can be, you need to be. We do have a tendency in different periods of our lives to be more activated by a certain one. Like for years, I was mountain woman. Don't give me a challenge and I'm going to move towards it. But each one, as you become aware of them, is balanced by the others. A grassland woman totally in community needs her moments of communion with desert woman. A forest woman who loves that wonderful, creative, juicy place of exploration and everything like that, at some point will need to emerge as mountain woman to put some of that into the world. An ocean and river woman, so attuned always to her emotions, may need a little bit of mountain woman boundary, right? Or desert woman solitude. So each of these, we all contain all of them. And as we come to know them, which is what I do, I sort of say, where do I feel I am today? And where do I need to be today? Which one am I going to summon today?
I think we look at them as guideposts. You know, a lot of times people say, I have to follow this through because that's what the book says. I have to follow it through because that's what I think I'm getting. When in essence, it's about saying there are guideposts there and take it from there and then live your life. You know, just as I shared with you before the show, I read the book, I make my notes, I close it up, I set it to the side, and then I proceed. You know, I think sometimes that's what our unconscious, our subconscious, our intuition will really start to take over rather than our conscious mind directing us down the path, perhaps.
Oh, I love that you said that. Yes, because this book is not prescriptive. You know, and each person is going to have their own experience of these archetypes. The beautiful thing about archetypes is that they're so powerful, their imagery is so strong, and they give birth to so many rich metaphors that we do find a language that we can speak to about our inner psyches and souls. And then you're absolutely right. It's about cultivating your own relationship with these particular archetypes. But once they're in you, you're in relationship with them. So that's the beauty. And archetypes, as we know from other archetypes, the warrior, the victim, you know, Athena, whatever, they're powerful. They kind of live in our bellies. They're somatic. Yeah.
But I think also, too, in closing, I wanted to share also that when you feel this and you have an experience, some tend to want to go back to that same experience because they believe that that is it, you know, in quotes. When in essence, if you can call upon the energy of the force or the spirit or whatever that might be, and you will have a different experience. A lot of times people will say, well, I want to journal it so I can read it again. I say just, you know, you may want to write it down for that moment, but then let it go. And don't go back to your old stuff, you know, because our life's ever changing. Every single second that we blink our eyes, the world has changed. And if we can remember that, then we can help the earth and nature within us, around us, on the same path of that too. You know, a lot of times people will say, you know, in New Orleans here, we need to get it back how it was. There's no getting back how it was. You know, It is what it is. It's all changed every single time. And people, well, I have to get back to my house. I have to get back to whatever. And when you let go of that, I have to get back to, and say, what would I like to create now based upon my energy that I'm feeling today? Perhaps maybe that's the greatest gift that this book can share with us. And I think that, you know, what we spoke about today is really about opening up to awareness, yes?
Yeah, I think that's beautifully stated. The other thing that I would just add to that is this book is not about fixing yourself. It's about freeing yourself to be yourself, whoever that is. And that's really different. A lot of self-help books are about fixing. We're not about fixing. We're about freeing, about rewilding, about coming back to what is most natural, organic, authentic within ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes we say, but now I need to have a different tool. Now I need to have a new perspective. Perhaps I can be grateful and have gratitude and compassion for where I am today, and definitely honor where you were in the past, but honor where you are in the present, right?
Yeah, and compassion. Yes. You know, if I could give you 2 words to take the journey, courage, you know, coming from your heart, cœur, the heart, courage, and compassion, to hold yourself loving and in a loving, gentle manner. Yes.
Well, Mary, it was such a pleasure to dance with you in the ethers, as I always call it, because I am such an air sign, and I just love to be able to dance with a book. I loved having this conversation today with you.
Oh, Dr. Jeanette, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
It was awesome. Mary, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
The best way to find out everything about my work is to go to my website, which is simply MaryReynoldsThompson.com, and it'll give you all the courses. It'll give you, there's a wonderful Wild Soul Woman archetype quiz, which one are you at the moment, which is really fun to take. So just a lot of material there.
Yeah, very awesome. Well, Mary, it was a pleasure, and we thank you so much, and we hope maybe you come on in the future again, and we could talk about this topic or something else that you have brewing.
Thank you. I would love that.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. If you'd like to find out more information about Mary Reynolds Thompson, again, the book is The Way of the Wild Soul Woman. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information. And it is about saying, how can we dance with the earth and the world around us? There's so many times we've been, growing up over the decades, we've had to muddle our way through, break down barriers, kind of clear out the woods with, our sickle. And we feel like we're always fighting against something. Maybe it's time to be able to say, can we work with these cycles, these breakdowns, these changes, these things that are going on, and nurture self and the world around us? Perhaps maybe now it's the time to be able to say, is there a different time? And have these conversations. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.